Hello, Carlos speaking. I'm back.
Oh, great. It seems like we may be live.
Is working the voice or there are some interruption?
Can you give me a Yahoo address?
Yes, I can hear you without interruption, Carlo, but I think we may now be live. I'll just check with my colleagues.
Okay.
Hello. Hello, Francois, we can see you.
So this is a quick message to the speakers. We're just going to do a quick camera and audio test. So I'll switch on your cameras and mics just for a few minutes. Please note that we're currently live, so the audience can see us while we do this mic and camera test. I'll just switch on your cameras. Now, you may have to switch on your cameras yourselves as well. and I'll be switching on your mics as well. Again, you will have to switch on your mics from your side as well.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I can hear.
Okay.
Do we have everyone? Carlo,
Ouais, mais ce que je comprends pas, c'est qu'il y a eu d'autres. Ouais.
Jules, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Carlo.
Ouais.
Very good.
Yes.
Okay.
I think Francois.
Can you hear me? That's okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Francois.
Okay.
I cannot see you.
That's strange because my camera seems to be on. Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
Can
I
you
can see you now. Yes.
Okay. Hello.
Hello, Francois. Hello, everyone. Hello, Elizabeth, Wolfgang, Celine.
Okay.
Hi.
Nice
Hi.
to see you all. I think Anuja, I don't know if you want to do a quick test.
Just a second. I won't be able to share my camera because we have reached the 6 webcam limit.
Right.
But I think you can hear me well.
Yes. I
Very
can hear
well.
you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
So once again, apologies. I think we for some technical issues, we've gone live, and so our audience can hear us and see us. It's not too many people just yet. It's still 20, just under 20 minutes to go. But I think we just do a quick mic and camera test. I think I can see all of you. I just want to check. Celine, can you say a few words? Hello.
Yes, hello, hi, good
Yes,
morning,
I
everyone.
can hear. Good morning. Nice meeting you. So I think I've had all of your voices, so that's working fine. So Anuja, do you want to go through things quickly?
Yes. So we will start with Jules's opening remarks, and after that, Carlo Borghini will take over. Once he's made his opening remarks, he'll introduce the first speaker, Elizabeth Werner, and we'll be sharing Elizabeth's slide. Once Elizabeth is done with her presentation, it will go over to Wolfgang Cooper once Carlos introduced him. After that, there'll be a Q&A with all the panelists involved, after which is Francois Devin. Again, after once Francois is introduced, you'll take over, and towards the end, it will be Celine after her introduction. Post that, again, we'll have a 20-minute Q&A in which all speakers will be involved.
Good.
Yeah, that's it.
So if you have any questions, we can take on questions right now. If not, I suggest I'll switch off our cameras again, and I stop the mic. Apologies for this, but we and then we'll open again a few seconds before the starting time, 10 o'clock. Sorry, 12 o'clock Europe time. Yeah,
Just remind me, the camera, we should have it on all the speakers when the others talk, and what do people will see?
Yeah, at the very beginning, we'll have all cameras on, just so that the audience will know who, we can see us all. And I'll make a very brief introduction, and Carlo will do an introduction. And during that time, cameras will be on. And then after that, when each presenter is presenting, then that's just that person. And then obviously during the panel discussion, everyone will be shown. Yeah. And you'll be prompted, we'll be switching on and off your cameras and mics, but you'll also have to unmute and agree to show the camera as well.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, then I suggest we switch off our cameras and mics again, and we'll start. We'll meet again sort of a few seconds before the start. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Welcome to the opening session of IRS Rail webinars presented by the International Railway Summit. My name is Jules Omura, the Managing Director of IRITS Events, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this session. It's great to see so many of you attending today. At the last count, we had over 460 people from 64 countries on all 6 continents registered for today's session. So welcome to all of you. What do the railway and event industries have in common? They both fulfill people's natural desire to get together. They are therefore both severely impacted by the pandemic, and they are both showing resilience in the current tough circumstances. We thought, what can we do to support the rail sector and keep our business going? We have then spoken to a number of rail operators, authorities, and our sponsors, and we quickly realized that operators desperately need information from sanitization and social distancing to business continuity and long-term recovery plans. There was no manual written for a pandemic of this scale, and they wanted to know what they should be doing and what other operators are doing. Our sponsors also needed opportunities to join the debate and promote their activities now that trade shows are cancelled and postponed. That is why we are here today. We're fortunate to have the support of such eminent speakers as we have today and at the next session on Tuesday next week. We'll be announcing further sessions in the next days and weeks to come with the support of rail authorities, operators, and indeed sponsors. Our webinars will have a twist. These are expertly curated, content-driven sessions, fully using our experience in conference production. Webinar sponsors will also enjoy in the future sessions our signature program of matchmaking and one-to-one meetings with their customers who are looking for their solutions. So the show must go on, and I hope that you enjoy our first virtual show today. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our guide today, Shift to Rail's Executive Director, Carlo Borghini. For many of you, Carlo does not need introduction. He's an active promoter of the rail sector, now in his 5th year heading Shift to Rail, the joint undertaking of railway research and innovation, funded by the European Union and the private sector. To quote his recent LinkedIn post, and I quote, "Serving rail has helped me through a terrific journey to learn more about rail. And when I do not know, tell me more, because rail is now also my passion." Carlo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jules. Good morning to everyone. I'm really honored for this introduction and for moderating this panel today. The topic is of extreme interest, post-COVID, what will be the new normal for rail travel. So I would like to start this session with a question to all the audience. You can answer with through the poll. The question will be, how long will the recovery take? So you can see the possible answer. If you take the time now to answer, we can also discuss later on with the panelists. And I'm really also honored to introduce the 4 panelists that will be with us today, starting in the order of they will be presented. Ms. Elisabeth Werner, the Director of Land Transport, Director General for Mobility and Transport from the European Commission. We have Mr. Wolfgang Küpper, Secretary General, Intergovernmental Organization for International Carriage by Rail, OTIF. After we'll have the panel with the second part with François Daven, the Director General of International Union of Railways. And finally, to close, we will have the Managing Director of the UBS. She is Head of European Industrial Equity Research, Ms. Céline Fornaro. But let me say a few words. As Jules said, I have a high-level interest in this panel, in this discussion this morning, because it's a double interest. One is we are preparing for the next generation and the successor of the Shift to Rail Research Innovation Program. So this will be a great opportunity also to have the inputs of the panelists, and also I hope from question and answer that the audience will ask and the panelists will answer, which is the possible also future content of our research innovation program, taking into consideration the impact of the current pandemic and the possible measure. But also the main question is how all the current situation will have an impact on the future model of mobility and transport, and how which are the medium long-term impacts for the operators, for the government, for the supply industry, but also for the workers inside the supply chain. So which are the lessons that we learn, which are the trends, expansion, how all this will impact the modal shift, how will this all link to the Green Deal that President von der Leyen presented at the end of last year. So all these elements are for the discussion today in this session. So maybe we can see if we have already the results of the poll. Okay, so there is a lot of expectation that the recovery will take more than 1 year. Many also thinking that will be 2 years, and large part also beyond 2 years. I think it's the perfect way to start and to give the floor to Ms. Elisabeth Werner. She will present the rail post-COVID, kickstarting the Green Deal with a perspective from the European Commission. Elisabeth, the floor is yours. I don't think we are hearing Elisabeth.
No, good morning. I had to unmute myself together with the organizers. A very good morning from the European Commission and from this new normal format. I think we have all over the last 2 months done a digital leap, and I think this is something that will also be very important for the railways in the new normal. Actually, there is, I think, 3 words that are defining our new normal. It's the digitalization, it's a good amount of agility to deal with unforeseen events, and it's a lot of resilience. When looking at transport, we see that it is in the top 2, 3, 4 most affected sectors by the COVID outbreak, but things are still developing very much and we learn every day. Railways have actually continued to function all through the lockdowns. In particular, rail freight has proved very reliable during the pandemic. It was much less disrupted than other modes, and also for passengers, railways over shorter distance and in urban transport have played an essential role in ensuring the connectivity and people with essential functions continuing to circulate. There was a lot of commitment also that I really find worth mentioning from transport workers, railway companies to keep things moving. We in the European Commission have also been very busy over the last 2 months to ensure essential supply chains are not disrupted. Swift measures were taken in March when many national borders within the EU were closed to ensure a certain number of continuity, and that was both for the goods to be able to cross the borders, but also for the essential transport workers that are required for carrying these goods. Of course, it means passenger transport, international dimension, very much came to a standstill, and we are now facing this situation of reopening the borders gradually, and this is what we should be looking at in this session. Let me briefly look back first, however, what happened over the last weeks. As the Commission, we put in place so-called green lanes that were to ensure a minimum of supply chains functioning. We set a quite ambitious target that it should take no more than 15 minutes to cross borders. And I think it's also something that for the railways we can keep in mind. The next thing we did was recommendations to the member states. I don't. In several communication to set out what this means exactly, both for the goods, for the workers, and for other essential workers. So we have issued a lot of recommendations and adjusted them in ways that allowed situation to follow as things developed. Now we are looking at gradual reopening of the borders and restoration of the transport service. The Commission published guidelines on the progressive restoration of transport services and connectivity on the 13th of May. In the spirit of these guidelines is that it is a gradual, scaled and coordinated reopening, taking into account also the health aspects and primarily the epidemiological needs in the different regions. The guidelines are quite clear in stating that as new and more efficient solutions become available, their deployment should be prioritized so that we can move away from burdensome measures, costly measures, and that we have to bear in mind the principle of cost efficiency, because it's clear that while the measures were required for health reasons to flatten the curve, they have also had quite an important cost both for business and for the societies. And I want to say that the railway companies have been acting very responsibly throughout the crisis and took a lot of measures to ensure the safety of staff and the safety of passengers. And we very much acknowledge all the work that has already taken place, and we want to build on the existing measures. I'm also aware that a lot of work is happening in UIC to define common public health measures for international trains. I think it's essential, and as a Commission, we also kept underlying that this needs to be done in a well-coordinated way, because indeed it would put both the passengers and the companies in almost impossible situation if they had to comply with two different sets of rules at the point of departure and at the point of arrival when carrying out international journeys. Also, our own European Railway Agency will be working on more detailed guidance, and they're in touch with the European Centre for Disease Control and other transport agency, because similar guidelines have already been issued for aviation. But we also find railway companies now in very dire financial situation because, of course, demand has been very much reduced, up to 80% for passenger traffic, especially international services, basically stopped, and also a third or a quarter reduced demand for trade transport, simply because industry also largely stopped. And of course, our trade with Asia was very heavily impacted already at the beginning of the year. So now we see demand gradually resuming, but companies in financial distress. And we're particularly looking at the smaller open access operators, which are the hardest hit, as they don't have any contracts which would allow equalizing some of the revenue, but also other companies, those operating under public service obligation, have faced huge losses. That's why already in March, we wrote to national administration, national ministries, to set out the available measures that governments could do to support railway companies. And I think we're very conscious that state subsidies, state aid will shape the transport landscape for the next coming years, and some choices will have to be made. As you know, rail underwent a long and difficult process of market opening in the EU, liberalizing open the access across borders for companies to operate. And the positive effects were just beginning to unfold when we saw passenger demand for railway services actually increasing and that was very welcome. But now the pandemic put that to a halt, and we're very eager that we can pick up again where we stopped and that we are not taking steps back, because we do believe that competition brings innovation and brings good quality services. It's also very important, as underlined by European heads of state and governance, that when we come out of this crisis, we really see a digital and sustainable transformation happening. Evidence shows us that a number of measures taken by the railways make it already the most energy efficient and greenest, and of course very safe transport mode. So we really hope that railways will come out strong after the crisis, being able to build on the resilience that they have shown in the last couple of weeks. And that's why it's clear to us also that relief measures for the railway undertakings are necessary. They should not be at the expense of the infrastructure managers, but it is quite clear to us that there has to be some compensation for the companies to come out very strong. And that's also, and in particular, necessary because we want to continue very forcefully with the European Green Deal. And that needs to go beyond the immediate liquidity and financial relief for a long-term recovery. Only last week, the European Commission has presented its multi-annual financial package. And I have to say that the rail sector really here has a unique advantage, being able to draw on a number of instruments that are part of the Commission's proposal to boost the investment. And this investment can go both to the infrastructure, because we have the green taxonomy already, and it can also go into renewal of the vehicles. And much more than in the past, this can make use of private financing sources, national financing sources, because there is a grant part, but there is also a very prominent loan part. And I should also say, of course, that we want to have a lot of research and innovation programs going on, and we are about to propose as well a renewal of the Shift Rail Research Joint Undertaking. So have a new reinforced long-term budget for the EU for the years up to 27, and the special recovery instrument, which is really unprecedented in its size and offers a lot of opportunities, front-loading some of the spending. And I hope that railways will be able to make good pitches for this, because there's a lot of projects waiting in the pipeline. And I really want to close with the digital transformation, where indeed this was one of the convincing winners of our experience with COVID. So this will be meaning that we have to invest into accelerating signaling and traffic management, but it also means other technologies. We've had very good experiences with satellite localizations. We have to boost automation and automatic handling, and we have to make use of 5G so that we can also have a more resilient railway system. This needs to be harnessed, in particular for rail freight, also deploying number of technology. Let me just mention here automatic coupling, that could be one of the beneficiaries of this. So I don't know if my slides have moved on or not, but I'm pretty much at the last one. We are now hoping that there will be a quick rebound for the railways. We also have a proposal to make 2021 the European Year of Rail. There's a number of important events and proposals, but mostly it's really about regaining or gaining new customer confidence in railways, both for the passengers, that it's a safe way of moving, and for freight, now that it has demonstrated that it can be reliable with a good capacity allocation. We want to make sure that this is not lost with traffic increasing, that there's a good coordination and a good integration into the multimodal mobility chain. So that's why we very much hope that 2021 will be declared European Year of Rail and give a boost to this way of mobility. It's necessary if we want to meet this challenge of digital and sustainable transformation, and we shouldn't fall back to our pre-COVID normal. We should really make this transformational leap towards more sustainable system for the future. I will leave it at that, and I very much look forward to the discussion. I'm also very pleased by the outcome of the poll that was quickly taken, because overall the audience that replied seems quite optimistic that there will be a fairly quick recovery, a sort of V-shaped recovery, and that's why we need to now get projects that we wanted to do anyway, we need to do them faster. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you for your speech. Unfortunately, the slide didn't move while you were speaking. Nevertheless, the slides are available for all the presenter in the handouts table that you have in your webinar. So if you go in handouts, you can download the slides and they are available to everyone. Let also me allow me to say something else. You can also ask directly questions to via two ways. One is introducing your question. I saw already many questions introduced in the small panel always in the webinar system. Mostly are technical questions, so please focus on the question on the content, because we have four great panelists here, so it will be good to interact with them from this point of view. And the other point, you can also raise your hand always in the attendee list. And if we have the time, we try to accommodate the possibility to answer additional questions. Now, I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, and in particular to Wolfgang Küpper, Secretary General of OTIF, who will present his slide, and I will invite him also to indicate when the slides have to switch, so that the colleagues in IRIS will take care of the movements of the slides. Wolfgang, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Before I come to OTIF's role regarding passenger transport and the COVID development, please let me shortly introduce my organization. So I start my slides. Yeah, OTIF is the organization and COTIF is the convention where I'm the Secretary General of. Our organization is an intergovernmental organization for international carriage by rail. It has 50 member states and 1 associate member, and our working languages are French, German, and English. We have our headquarters situated in Bern, Switzerland. Yeah, regarding the convention, COTIF, it's important to say, that this convention is very old. It has a long history. It's stemming from 1893. And the convention is applied on 217,000 kilometers of railway lines. It's also important to mention that in 2011, the European Union acceded to COTIF. So this slide shows you the base convention on the left side, and on the right side, very important, our appendices to the convention. And we are, with these base convention and dependencies, providing transport law rules. We are providing rules for dangerous goods transports, and also for interoperability and safety. So what is concretely OTIF's task and role? The task is developing uniform railway law for interoperable railway networks. It's international law, it's binding and sometimes also soft law. It's a bridging concept, and it's an approach based on partnership. And what we're also providing is that we connect railways that we are uniform and that they are uniform and interoperable. So we can say the main task of OTIF are providing legal interoperability as well as safety and technical interoperability. The next slide shows you the member states, the membership of OTIF. As I said, 50 member states, mainly in Europe, but more and more we are also growing to East and Asia, and also some African countries are members of OTIF. And we have also memoranda of understanding with China and also with the countries on the Arabic Peninsula. That means with the GCC countries. Yeah, what's the role of OTIF regarding passenger transport? That is the issue of our webinar. Yeah, we are providing, I said it in the beginning, transport law. That means we have rules concerning the contract of international carriage of passengers, the so-called CIVUR. It's private law, as I said. It's a regulation of legal relationship between passengers and carriers. And it's providing legal certainty. That means, yeah, the rights and obligation of the parties of the contract of carriage are clearly defined. And also our law is ensuring a liability and a special degree of harmonization. It's also important to say that's multimodal. It's not only a train or train transport, it's also linked to road transport and to maritime and also inland waterways. So you have really a multimodal approach regarding this transport, that you have the complete transport chain in it. What is the advantage of COTIF? Yeah, we are really providing a single uniform legal regime, and the rights and the obligations clearly defined are providing legal certainty. And these two things were very important for the decision of the European Union to taking over our legal regime to put it in a special regulation. You all know it, it's a regulation on passenger rights 1371 from 2007, where the recast is now ongoing between the European Parliament and the Council. Yes, I come now to the question, what are the challenges for rail transport by COVID-19? I think we have two things to consider. I think what we saw during the crisis, the travel behavior changed and also the working conditions. So in my view, people generally avoid traveling. People are using more private car by feeling more safety. And also their business and shopping behavior changed. More and more they're using e-business. Regarding the traveling on short distance passenger transport commuting, I think it's also important to see that there is more telework and that people generally avoid to use mass transport. So if they have a chance, they avoid it. And last but not least, regarding the working conditions, I think it's important to mention that we have more and more video conferences, remote meetings, and less business trips. Yeah, what are the consequences? How should we react from the railway sector as stakeholders, as responsible persons? So I think it's very important to differentiate between really the special phases of the crisis. The emergency case, which we have really had in the last month, in the last 3 or 2 months. Then there will be a transitional period and hopefully also the normal situation, as the poll will show. So what is our task is to make the rail system more resilient for emergency cases. And I think these emergency cases are not only important regarding pandemics, but also, as we have seen in the future, in the past, regarding security issues, terrorist attacks, for example, but also to make them resilient for climate change, the infrastructure. Regarding the transitional periods, I think it's very important to use special tools. We have seen a very good example in Austria, where the state pays also subsidies, or at least for the cost, for the extraordinary costs regarding to long distance passenger transport. Normally, the state only pays public service obligations in short distance passenger transport, but the Austrian state decided to also finance these losses which the companies faced in this crisis during or regarding the long distance passenger transport by observing, that is very important, competition law. Yeah, and the last phase we have to consider is the emergency case. That means also in this special case, it's very important to have concepts and plans ready. So what are the consequences for policymakers? I think it's also important to react with a sense of proportion. We should not give up our sustainability goals, whether they're coming from the United Nations or from the European Union. The Green Deal for transport should be continued. Also, what we should not have is a shift to individual motorized transport, private cars, which I mentioned at the beginning. I think that would be a risk for sustainability. And again, regarding pandemic resilience, it's important to differentiate between the different phases: emergency case, transitional phase, and the new normal. Let me come now to general conclusions. So what we considered during the crisis were two things. I think it was the responsibility of the state on the one side, and also that was a little bit negative, that we got mostly unilateral decisions and responses. Regarding the first point, the state reaction or the state responsibility, I think it's important to say that there is only a responsibility in emergency cases. So the general role of the state remains unchanged. The state sets the legal framework for railways, they invest in infrastructure, and they pay for public service obligations. Regarding the second phenomenon, we have these unilateral responses. I think these responses are generally suboptimal, and they show also a lack of certainty for actors and customers of the rail system. So multilateral coordinated responses are more predictable and therefore potentially less disruptive. I think that was also said by Ms. Werner, and the role of UIC. What are the special conclusions for my organizations, for OTIF? I think we can do something regarding the legal framework also in regard of emergency and pandemics. OTIF could set up international rules in the future, for example, may it be private law or public law. There was one good example during the crisis. We have this responsibility for dangerous goods law, and we have had the task to have multilateral special agreements. For example, for the transport of oxygen. You all knew these TGV sanitaire. You have seen these pictures in France, where the TGVs were used to transport patients, but also oxygen. And that there therefore were special rules needed. And we decided, or we make it possible, that these rules should be very fast adopted. And these agreements were notified on our website and made public by it. So my resume for this webinar is, I think the new normal will not be the old normal, that's for sure. But international rail transport will be able to cope with the challenge, and OTIF is willing to support it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. We have now a bit shorter series of question and answer. I have some question in the question small panel I see. I would like to start from Elizabeth, asking a question to her. You presented a full package addressing different issues, addressing different elements. One of the questions that we received from the also from the European Passenger Federation is that a large part of the population is afraid using or returning to public transport. Well, how to restore the confidence in the public transport, generally speaking, and particularly on rail? And as also Wolfgang said before, do we risk to go back more to unsustainable individual mobility? Is only a question of disinfectant deployed and social distancing, or do we need to start to think a way to provide the assurance to the population in a different manner? I believe what you presented shows already the different type of measure, but maybe if you have any type of insight or any views that you would like to express on it.
Yes, thank you very much for this question. Well, I think it's absolutely essential that there's a clear communication by public authorities together with the railway undertakings about the measures that are being taken in this period we're in right now, which is a transition phase. And it has to be absolutely clear that a number of measures are taken, that they are effective, that they are in line with what is recommended also with the health authorities to make travel in collective modes of transport safe. While I'm a big supporter of cycling and walking, clearly we have to provide affordable alternatives also for longer distances, and I don't think any of our cities would be able to cope without the public transport system. Any of our countries would be able to cope without a reliable railway system for passengers. So it's very, very important to regain the trust of the passengers, and for that, the measures that are recommended are, you already hinted, Carlo, clearly more cleaning, more disinfection. They include distancing, which is what our health authorities recommend as far as possible and wherever possible in the stations for boarding or unboarding the carriage. Where this is not possible, wearing of masks provides a suitable alternative. We have seen a number of railway companies also organizing seating arrangements or reservation of seats. All these are measures that may be necessary at this particular moment in time to demonstrate and to show that health is at the heart of the operations, both for the staff and for the passengers, to provide the reassurance. Of course, we know these measures are also a burden. They also have a cost. And that's why we need to constantly reassess them to see how long are they really necessary, what do we learn about the virus, what do we learn about the epidemiological situation, and then, as I said, adjust them, constantly reassess them, adjust them. Whenever there are measures that are equally efficient and less burdensome, we have to immediately provide a new protocol and a new format. And I want to underline once again how important it will be that these measures are well coordinated, because it will be very confusing and very difficult to explain to people why certain measures are necessary in a train, other measures are necessary in a bus, and a different set of measures would be applicable in aviation, for instance. But this is just by way of example. And this is why our European authorities and agencies, in particular international bodies, UIC, also have an important role to play, that we come to an agreed set of measures, and that agreed set of measures has to reflect the latest scientific knowledge. I think this is the only that we need to do in full transparency and well communicated to regain the trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. Also a question from Wolfgang. I said we don't have so much time. I'm trying to pick the question coming. Wolfgang, the spread of the COVID is not only a question of sanitary crisis or pandemic, but is also a substantial financial one. I think worldwide we have a recession that is in some cases 2-digit. Perspective of recovery, if everything goes fine, towards 2021 and maybe 2022. So what about dependency of rail transport on investment, and how investment can be ensured also after the crisis? Any views?
Yeah, thank you very much for these questions. Yeah, I think it's not only a health crisis, it's also, as you mentioned, an financial crisis, and they will be, or a worldwide recession is very likely. So I think we should really look for every alternative for financing. So there will be, as I said in my presentation, of course, the responsibility of the states for financing the infrastructure to pay for the losses during the crisis. But on the other side, we should also look for alternative solutions for financing, whether it will be infrastructure or rolling stock. And yes, for example, regarding my organization, we are the secretariat, or will be the secretariat, for the so-called Luxembourg Protocol. That is also a financial instrument to support the purchase of rolling stock of railways. So I think every source of financial help should be used in this crisis, but generally the financing instruments should be the same as before the crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wolfgang. I have a small question. If you, both of you, maybe you can answer also in really few seconds with a short answer, but there are some questions from the audience asking, do you think that the current individual business behavior will become a permanent one, and this will be an opportunity maybe for rail also to create new services complementing what they are offering today? Maybe Elizabeth, you want to start?
Yes, I'm trying to figure out what the question means, but of course every crisis is an opportunity, and we have seen a number of good developments for railways that I very much hope can be perpetuated and can be kept when we go back to normal. The first is the emphasis on digitalization, automation for handling of cargo, for handling of ticketing, for handling of reservations. That is very positive. We should keep. The second one was the capacity priority given to rail freight for the international traffic. Rail freight has proven to be particularly reliable because all of a sudden it was easy for them to get attractive train paths for international trains. So there was the pasta train, for instance. There was a lot of new services being set up. The crisis had made people more creative and more cooperative than they usually were. And I hope that this is also things that we can keep when we go back to more busy lines and more normal business. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Wolfgang, do you want to add something?
Yeah, maybe. Thank you very much. I completely agree with Elizabeth. I think it's very important to learn from this crisis, and there are lessons learned. I think what is very important, it's not so much regarding the offer or what the railroads are providing. It's more about the availability or that they are resilient, that they have really answers if once again such a crisis will happen. So and regarding the functioning of the railways, I hope really that it was really a special case, as I said, so that we surely come back to the normal as soon as possible. So regarding the performance of the railway undertakings or the railway system in general, there are lessons learned, but I hope we come back to the normal as soon as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Wolfgang. Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Wolfgang, for having answered also the question. I would say that now we are moving to the second part of the discussion, starting with François Daven, the Director General of the International Union of Railways. François has some slides, and also UIC has a specific task force to deal with the COVID situation. So, François, the floor is yours, please. Also, would be interesting, François, to understand your views about the small poll we have done. If you share the view that the recovery will take longer than 1 year, and which are the expectations that also you have from UIC point of view. We're waiting that François is connecting, so it might take a few seconds because we have more than almost 250 participants. Yes, now we can hear you. Very good. Thank you. The
Okay.
floor is yours.
And can you see the slides also?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so everything is perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Well, that's a tough question to know how many times it will take for, let's say, resuming the full activity. Well, my personal thinking in having seen the commitment of all railways during this crisis, well, is that in about 1 year from now, we should be normally able to resume more or less close to full activity. Why I am saying that is because in a way, after a crisis like the one of the COVID, we had to change heavily our habits, and there is concrete impacts. Well, there is economic impacts. I would prefer to say that there is an economic impact of the crisis because the real economy has been struck by the crisis, obviously, because people were not able to go to work, basically. But I will not say that, at least for now, there is a financial crisis. It's a crisis within the real economy. And I think that the real economy will recover, and if we have no impact, not too much damaging impact on the financial sphere, and I think that in particular the European Central Bank is doing whatever it takes for avoiding that there is financial consequences, the real economy should be able to recover. And in particular for transport, well, I think we have experienced during this period, and in particular for people that are living in cities, very strange things. I remember, well, I also cycling like Elizabeth in Paris. I remember having been cycling on the Champs-Élysées, absolutely empty of any kind of cars. It's a very strange impression, and in a way you realize that it's perhaps possible to have a new paradigm for transport. And I think that in the long run, this very simple vision that we have all seen our cities, in fact, empty from cars from one time, there will be a thinking about that. There will be a second thinking that will be about teleworking, because we have been experiencing teleworking in our different organizations. In UIC, we are resuming activity next week, but we are still on teleworking. That means that normally that should be, at the end of the day, less pendular traffic. So that means that we have an opportunity to perhaps better organize the pendular traffic and having more flexibility. So, well, I will be rather optimistic for what will come next. But in my speech, I will perhaps concentrate on what we did within UIC on for struggling to the crisis. So basically, what we did is to rely on our members. Just after the crisis struck, we consulted with our different members, and we see, for example, that our Asian members were very keen to help, and that also our European members were also very keen to learn what have been done in Asia. So we set up a UIC COVID-19 task force, which has gathered 70 UIC members and 19 international organizations. That was very important for us to have also international organization, because as Elizabeth said, we will only be able to recover if we have a coordinated way of setting up measures. So we had a very close collaboration with UITP for public transport, with IATA for aviation, and at the end of the day, we hope that the results of our work will be first adaptable, and second, homogeneous enough to not disrupt the mobility chains. So we issued different documents. First, UIC guidance for railway stakeholders. So this one is about what are the short-term measures to be taken. We also set up a dedicated workspace on our UIC extranet with the whole documentation which is shared by our members. a dedicated forum to raise and answer specific questions, and a database with all contributions for task force members. And I think it was very important for our members to have this sharing because, as Wolfgang said, there is a dialogue, obviously, between railway undertaking and their authority in trying to find the most adapted measures. And I think that this documentation has been very instrumental for our members in this dialogue to set up measures that are not too much different in the different European countries in particular. So we also set up video conferences every 2 weeks with all task force members, a media center, which is on our website, and a dedicated LinkedIn group. But I think what will be more interesting is to see on a map the railways that were dedicated into this COVID-19 task force. You can see that it was an actually international effort. And for example, even if we don't have that much UIC member in Africa, we did with the Moroccan operator a very interesting webinar for Africa, where we had an attendance far beyond the UIC members. So what is interesting to see here is that all the UIC members, all the railway undertakings, they acted as they were a part of the same network, and they had to share what were the solutions. So practically speaking, we issued 3 documents. First of all, a document about management of COVID-19, a series of potential measures. So it was in March 2020, so very early. So it's some kind of handbook where the different railway undertakings shared the measures they were taken, and that have been very instrumental in setting up the different sanitary measures that were implemented, also the management measure. Then we had a second document which was about the management of those measures, because on all those questions, which are very complicated, it's good to know exactly how the different railway undertakings have issued management measures for making them efficient. So we shared all those issues. And the third one, which have been released at the end of last week, we call it resilience, it's a play on word, to be a collection of all the measures taken and how we should collectively think what should be done the day after for the next new normal. So I will just give a list, but what is important to insist here is about the sharing, because, well, we all know that there is something to do about temperature checks, for example, but the actual question is how to implement temperature checks in stations that today are open facilities. So you can enter into a station the way you want. It's not a closed shop like airports. So what is important in all those different items is to share the how. Precisely how was it implemented, how was it efficient or not, and what it is possible to use. So we have a precise guidance on concrete measure, basically from person to person first, so temperature checks, how does it work, questionnaires to be able to assess not only measures, but how these measures were implemented, and how the customers were comfortable or not with this kind of measure, how to use masks, sanitation gel, social distancing, and ventilation. And there is also something about object to person, how to implement cleaning and disinfection, tickets, how to go into paperless, and how to use waste disposal. So there is a lot of exchanges between our members, and if I will take an example, there is also a lot of new technology in that. For example, recently, Infrabel is using previously implemented development on artificial intelligence to have a diagnostic within their own team about the respect of social distancing. So basically, there is beyond the cameras algorithms that are looking to the image of people working in the workshop in Infrabel and alerting if the artificial intelligence is sensing that there is something that is not accurate. Obviously, all of that is made in respecting fully the privacy of the staff member. A second very important angle is about communication, because obviously we will resume operation if we are able to restore confidence. And we have a lot of very interesting practice about how crisis communication can reduce anxiety. During the lockdown period, well, it has been said generally, so I will not insist very much on this slide, but it has been said that basically the rail sector has been quite resilient and have helped the community to struggle against the situations. Well, obviously freight, because as Elizabeth said, freight has been really a key actor for being sure that all what is needed in our city continue to be displayed in close, obviously in close collaboration with the road sector. It was also the case of all the rail, commuter rail and short distance rail that stood during the crisis and allowed for the society to resume operation. And what was very important during the COVID-19 task force was the continuous dialogue with UITP. We have been very keen to be sure that our measures are coordinated in order to not have breakdown between rail and public transport. So what is next? We are working on a document to pave the way to service resumption. So we are working heavily together to think about the measures that will be necessary, how we can ensure social distancing on more than the duration of the pandemics, how the different measures should articulate, whether it is long distance or regional trends, what are the new technologies that would be able to improve both the sanitary security and restore the traffic. For example, we have very interesting discussion on air conditioning, because we have seen that depending of the air conditioning technology and the way you are implementing your air conditioning, you are improving drastically the safety regarding the epidemics. And also what should be the measure to restore the confidence in train and stations. We will also work on economic impact. We still need to really assess what are the missed revenue on short, medium and long term. And also we will be working on desired economic measures. So what should be the direct financial contribution? What should be done on access charges, on taxes, perhaps on guarantee loans, and also to develop a fair level playing field between all transport modes. So that will be the end of my short presentation. As a conclusion, I will perhaps insist on one word that I think I've not been pronounced by the previous speaker, but that in a way make a synthesis of what we need. During this crisis, we have seen that we are all interconnected. We have seen that for the worst, the pandemics. As everything is interconnecting, the pandemics has been spreading all over the globe, hopefully rapidly. But we also see that due to those interconnection, I mean human, and also due to the technical and digital tools, we have been able to respond to this pandemic. So the solution for the future, from UIC point of view, is within one word, which is a network. We need to set up rail and public transport into some kind of unified network. And for that, research will be absolutely key, because what we need now is to find the solution for getting rid of the cumbersome aspect of public transport. Lack of interconnection, different ticketing schemes, difficulties to have information. We also, during this crisis, that, well, indeed, the whole system stood up, but there is a lot of lack of cross information, and it's still very difficult to say that there is a seamless interconnection between railway system and, for example, public transport system. So we should together strive to reach this point. And I would like to finish in saying that what is for UIC absolutely key, because we are a technical body, is the continuation of Shift to Rail into a new joint undertaking in order to be able to develop all those features. And we do think that it will be here absolutely crucial in terms of digitalization to implement 5G in all transport mode and in a coordinated manner. And within UIC, we are absolutely dedicated, since we are in a way mastering the specification process for railways, which is called FRMCS, Future Railway Mobile Communication System for 5G, to have this very collaborative approach with UITP, but not only, also with all the manufacturers and with UNIFE, to make sure that tomorrow morning, the new normal will be a new normal with a new paradigm for public transport. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francois. Thank you. It was an extremely interesting insight from UIC perspective. I have a few questions that we received in the meantime that I will ask you after we have heard from Céline. But let me introduce now, before the final session of question and answer, Céline Fornaro, the Managing Director, Head of European Industrial Equity Research of UBS. She provided a different perspective, and her title is quite interesting: By Train or By Plane? The Traveler's Dilemma After COVID-19 and Amid Climate Concerns. So, Céline, please, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Carlo.
Thank you.
I think you can hear me.
Absolutely.
And I think you can see me now as well. So thank you for having me. As you said, I'll try to give a little bit of a perspective, maybe on the long-term side of things, I mean, medium term as well, and which also probably answers well to some of the initial questions that was asked to the panel on when do we see the recovery. And I would say that, you know, one thing is on passenger numbers, where, you know, probably 1 year, 1.5 years is probably what you would need. But also, I think we should differentiate maybe on revenues, and going back to 2019 revenues might take a little bit longer because, you know, both in aviation or transportation in general, you may need to have to lower prices initially to attract customers back. So I think there is that distinction that we would make. But let me now move on to our first slide, which basically in this presentation, we tend to cover mainly, just to be clear, high-speed train, because the approach of myself and the team when we did it was to say, okay, we are in a more and more green aviation or green aviation push world. What is the risk of people in Europe, but also in other jurisdictions, you know, in China or the US, that they're going to look at other modes of transport? And so the competition with the airplane comes really from high-speed train. rather than urban rail on others. So that's where we focused, and we've done different things, but one of the key things was to understand on which routes, which are still quite strong domestic or intra-European air travel routes, there could be an expansion of use of train. And for this, what we did was to sample 4,000 consumers globally, in France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and also in China, where the high-speed network is very developed there, and trying to understand the acceptance level that people have. So how long are you ready to sit, on a train? And most importantly, for business travel. And I think the general assumption is that it's like 2 to 3 hours. But what you actually see when you look on the charts on the right-hand side is that on countries that either have competition, most recent competition introduced, such as Italy, or most recent infrastructure networks like Spain, business travels are ready to accept 4 hours journey. And I think this is the key question for the transportation out there. And it's come up regularly in the previous speaker's conversation, is as we move into more liberalization, better service, better communication on board or frequency, there is a bigger risk than on some routes identified on the map on your left, that the Paris-Frankfurt, for example, already existing, but also Paris-Milan potentially one day could be a threat to air travel. Now, if you move on to the next slide, you will see that what we've tried to do is to reflect these lower growth rates into intra-regional Europe and intra-regional China, and in the US as well, one from high-speed train, and two from green, willingness to stop climate change, which has been putting some people off from air travel. I think clearly Europe is the region where it's most felt. You just look at, one extreme is the Swedish traffic statistics, but also a little bit in the US, this trend is picking up in California and some part of the East US, and potentially in China. So aviation is like transportation. You can have long-term growth rates, which are generally assumed, for aviation around 5%. Of course, domestic China, expectations were more about 8% before COVID, and Europe was more around 4% intra-regional. And when we adjust for these factors of high-speed rail links and green aviation, we basically see that the intra-European air travel basically goes to zero growth, or not far from it. And in China, it slows down from an 8% growth rate to 6%. So this means that a high-speed train takes people away from road, but also from air travel. And I think really what I want to stress is that goes with improved service, right? And improve availability of working time onto a train. And I'll come back onto that slightly later. And then if you go on to the next slide, what we've tried to assess as well is what it means in terms of lower number of planes potentially needed to serve those markets, because your global growth is moving from a 5% plus down to a 4%, so you're going to need less airplanes. And hopefully airlines retire old planes rather than stop buying new ones, which are more fuel efficient. They actually help saving fuel. What airlines should be doing is ground old airplanes. So COVID-19 provides a great opportunity from this perspective, because all of us are aware on the amount of planes that are grounded out there. So the airlines will have to think probably more proactively, okay, which plane am I going to take back? Which one is going to let me to save X amount of CO2, so that, for the consumer and my communication with the consumer, I actually have a strong backing. And so the conclusion of this is that we basically need roughly 200 less planes per annum, in these three geographies, just because the intra-regional market growth is slightly lower than what you thought before. Now you could say, why didn't we do this analysis on long haul on a post-COVID? we're thinking about that. Clearly, there are implications on this, but this one really focuses, as I said, on high-speed train and green aviation for short to medium haul traffic. So you could see there that the incentive for airlines is to try and cooperate with railway operators on domestic routes or intra-regional routes, and we've got some examples in Germany of this. And actually, for the airlines, especially the legacy carriers, this is a win-win situation because generally they don't make a lot of money on domestic routes, and if you don't cooperate, you run the risk that you lose your market outright, a bit like the Rome-Milan route, which was an amazing air travel route, and now is all gone to the train. Now, let me move, or mostly. If we move on to the next slide, and some of these comments have already been made by the previous speakers, but basically it is recognized that rail is the cleanest or most environmentally friendly transport mode. You have the chart on the left compares the emissions for each one. Also in terms of time efficiency, and I think this is very important, it's the usable time that you've got when you travel by train compared to plane. And I think COVID and all these Zoom meetings and as long as you have an internet connection now, the amount of meetings that you could do anywhere is much higher, or is accepted for you to be anywhere. It's much higher and an unprecedented level in our society. So I think we should really build on this. This also means, as Ms. Werner was saying, satellite communication, all these things clearly need to be much more sophisticated also on the railway infrastructure. If you move on the next slide, it will give you a clearer picture of the maps and the trunk routes that we have identified in Europe, where we have the competition. But I think what is really key, and I really want to stress this, it comes hands in hand with liberalization, because that brings new competitors to the market, which will have, or we've seen historically, brought in new equipment, so new rolling stock. We also have a more uniform signaling system going, which should help the speed. And of course, the upgrade infrastructure. For example, in Germany, there is this gigantic 86 billion plan to upgrade infrastructure on a 10-year view. On also some things like, upgrading rail bridges, 2,000 rail bridges creation, which of course will improve the speed of the network. Also, of course, reducing takt time, or also creating stations outside, the city, as we could have in France. But I think, liberalization coming in Spain and France, for example, we've seen, the results in Italy. Germany is already liberalized, but it definitely helps in creating higher demand and taking new people back onto train. And then my next slide will be on the forecast that we have for this market. Of course, we use UNFE as a base reference, but when we do all these opportunities and we stack them up together, we basically end up for the high-speed market with a significant higher growth rate than what we had expected before. So we're now expecting 11 billion opportunity for an accessible market for the rolling stocks provider in 2022, which is nearly double the current estimates. And similarly in signaling, we do expect an incremental 600 million more on a 10-year view compared to what UNFE is forecasting. So the growth rate, even for corporates involved in rolling stock, signaling and infrastructure, are actually much better than what we would have thought, a couple of years ago. Yes, COVID will shift these things potentially by a year, but as we've heard by Ms. Werner, there is a willingness to stick to these infrastructure investments and upgrade, the rail infrastructure in general. And with that, thank you very much, and I'll hand over back to Carlo.
Thank you, Selina. It's an extremely interesting presentation. Some questions arrived also for you and Francois. So I will start maybe, if I may, with you, Céline. Francois, I will come back to you later on. But one question is quite interesting because it really refers to what you were mentioning. On one side, you started almost saying, well, the return to the new normal, it may take longer than expected, and we need to make a difference in terms of passenger and revenues, because this is clearly two different expectations. And one question says, but in a situation in which we are going towards a little state backing, because we are going to open access market situation, how do we build the investor confidence and risk appetite for significant capital investment for the new high-speed rolling stock? And this from a banker perspective, like UBS perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the risk on the development of new technologies, I mean, the companies in the sector and those that are quoted have been proven to have very strong credentials in handling projects. And, you know, on this, you've got, you know, the European names, Alstom, Siemens, but also, you know, the Hitachi. They have had a big growth, you know, since 2014 as well, when you look at the order books and the pipeline. And the execution, you know, fingers crossed so far, has been fairly good. And the investors' perception of those businesses, yes, they're lumpy, and you know, they're big investments of cash flows, 50 million, you know, euros for a train. But you know, the visibility level has improved, and it is a structural trend, growth trend that we see. Yes, so I think investors are actually understandable on this.
Thank you very much, Francois. Back to you. You talked a lot about the relation with UITP, but also the relation with other IATA and others. Do you think the current situation should change perception of public transport, or can have an impact on changing the perspective on public transport? And which type of maybe opportunities you see from this the current situation?
Well, I do think that it will change the perception of public transport, because we will, in a way, have more pressure from the user perspective, because we have two different trends. First of all, a trend that was very well explained on high speed, that there is more and more perception that we should use more, let's say, frugal mode of transport to spare energy and to spare time. So rail and public transport have a very good momentum. But on the other hand, with this crisis, you can feel it when you speak with your neighbors or your colleagues, that there is a little bit this fear to be part of the public transport, to go into the station, to go into the wagons, and so far and so on. So we will have a duty to deliver, I mean, a continuum of services within public transport that will give to the customer this feeling of confidence, this feeling of comfort, this feeling that we are collaborating together to provide seamless services. So I think that will be a huge driver for better collaboration with all those modes. And well, in particular, normally tomorrow, we should issue a common statement between UNIFE, UITP, and UIC to just explain that we should collaborate together to have a new sense of public transport together.
Thank you, Francois. Elizabeth, maybe one other question for you. Many of the audience are asking the question, what happened? Because here we have somehow a dichotomy, because on one side we are talking about transport, but the other side we have more and more people maybe be confident to use more digital communication instead of traveling. So let's be clear, I'm working more from home instead of traveling. Do you think this will be becoming a permanent trend? I also understood that in the European Union, during the Finnish presidency, there has been an attempt to reduce the meeting in the council and trying to have more digital meetings, but this didn't work out as expected. But now we are in front of something working every single day. We have been moved from one day to the other to the biggest, widest experiment of teleworking. So which is your views on, which are your feedback from this point of view?
I think the answer is that it's a development over time. While now we have seen something like 80% reduction in any movements in mobility, generally speaking, this is the short term until people have regained the confidence, the health measures are being lifted, and there will be a vaccine as well for COVID. I'm pretty sure about this. And you have to compare this with our forecast that were for 30–40% growth of the demand in mobility until 2030. So it's true that when people change their behavior, when people move differently or work, shop online, this will somewhat, I think, reduce, if this trend lasts, it will somewhat reduce the trend in mobility. But I do really think that we will not go back to figures that are much lower than what we have seen pre-COVID. So it will be perhaps a different form of mobility. You might see more online shopping, but that still requires goods to move. People might not go to the office every day, but I think they will still want to do holiday trips or go and see family and friends or across borders. So I don't forecast a reduction in the overall mobility if we think in the sort of medium term, perhaps according to the poll you conducted, Carlo, maybe 3 years from now, I'm pretty sure it will go back to where we've been before, probably perhaps flattening a bit this trend to the increase. And this is where all these forecasts and this opportunity for railways come in, because hopefully this appetite for more sustainable environment will stay. I think our Commission President, Mrs. von der Leyen, has put it quite nicely. There will be a vaccine against COVID, but there will not be a vaccine against climate change. And I think this will be staying in people's mind.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Wolfgang, also Francois spoke before about the network, spoke before about the need to have a coordinated approach. I think we have experienced during the lockdown clearly national decision that were considered acceptable, I think, by everyone because unavoidable. But now I think everyone has expectation about a more coordinated approach, more structured approach, because I think what we have experienced is that having borders back, it doesn't seem strange to all of us. So how, from your point of view and from your organization point of view, as you already mentioned, there are a good example, for example, from Austria, a measure taken. How you think this measure can be, like also Elizabeth mentioned, brought up at the European level to start with, but maybe also for Francois at the global level, because at a certain point in time, we bring together continents.
No.
Maybe I start, yes. Yeah, I agree completely. I think what is really needed is this integrated approach, and that was what Francois said, that we are really all interconnected, and that was really a lesson learned during this crisis. That all these unilateral measures are not a solution. We should really more be interconnected and work more on multilateralism, whether it will be on the state level or whether it will be on the railway level. That is, for me, the most important thing. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if I may, I fully agree. We should go to more multilateralism. That's quite obvious at both levels. And UIC, which is doing multilateralism with railways, is absolutely convinced that anyway we are more clever together than alone. That's an absolute truth. And but the second aspect, I think, which for me is important, is that we should take the lesson of digital systems, because what we saw during this period is that if we continue to say that, let's say, we have to make more digital the railway system, I'm not sure we have the right approach, because it cannot be a slogan or something we add on top of our existing architecture within the railway system. We need to have our architecture evolving to allow to have all the benefits of digital thinking. Well, I don't really have time to explain, but when you are speaking about an integrated network, there is a recipe of theories that allows the network to be optimal. And those recipes are partly within the IT sector, telecommunication and computer science, but there is ways of making a network optimal from a very scientific point of view. And I think that's the reason why I insisted about research, and in particular about Shift to Rail 2. We really need to have the digital thinking at the heart of the system architecture, and for that UIC will be very committed to help.
Thank you. I agree completely with you. We need to have a system approach. As you mentioned before, we have a European network, and we cannot have borders on the ground, borders that we don't have today in the air. Last question for Céline, if I may. Many people are asking, did you make similar analysis for freight? As Elizabeth said, freight was capable to ensure the connection of the different supply chains. Did you have some similar perspective in your analysis, or you think you will be doing something in this manner?
So I think we haven't looked into freight for different reasons. One is that we see it as more a way to pioneer technologies or uniform technologies approaches. But then, where there is a lot of revenue coming from is clearly more on things that are related to the passenger side. Also from a freighter point of view, within Europe, a lot is done by roads as well, and trains, not very much so by air. I mean, a little bit, but it's not significant. And it's not a high share of revenues of our companies. And so generally you see that it helps to implement, ground rules, if I can put it that way, and paradigms. Yeah. But then the money and the pricing and all these things are driven more by the passenger side in terms of, the latest kit, the latest effort. Having a train that has the 5G capability, how do you connect that? How do you make it safer? For freight, you may not yet need that.
I hope we will be back in a few years having a different discussion about freight, because I think we have a lot of expectation to make a major change for freight, starting with the famous digital automatic couplers we are working on together with the Commission and clearly UIC. But I need to conclude because the time is unfortunately taking over. So thank you very much, first of all, to all the speakers. Has been extremely insightful and interesting discussion. I have a few communications. Well, first of all, I would like to resume a bit the discussion, but I think we have a strong expectation to look at the future in a positive manner. We know that we have still obstacles in front of us, but as we discussed, in a European approach, coordinated measure, taking the opportunities coming from the current situation can create for rail a major opportunity. As Elizabeth mentioned, we can find a virus for maybe COVID, but for sure climate change remains and is something that we need to tackle. So sustainable mobility and transport enabled by digitalization and automation are really the key words that can help the rail sector to offer, as also Céline mentioned, different services, different opportunities that will change a different type of business model with great opportunity. Thank you very much for this. I would like to only to take a few last aspects. The first one is that the slides are not always downloadable through the handouts, and if the technical solution will not be found, they will be transmitted to all the participants. So don't worry, you will have the slides of the 4 speakers. And will not be a problem. But let me also mention the next webinar that is organized by Iris, and the next webinar will take place, I think, in 1 week, and will be on, let me find my notes because I lost them in the organization of the things. But there will be the participation of Joseph Dovelbauer. There will be the participation of, will be moderated by Libor Lockman, will be Kier Fitch from Director General of MOVE, Kurt Bauer from OBB, and Nicolas Castres-Saint-Martin, Chief Technology Officer at VIP Engineering of Alstom. And the topic of the discussion will be always related to the measure to recover from the current COVID situation with a different type of perspective, as also mentioned before by Elizabeth, on the role of ERA in such a situation. I would like to thank you, all the participants, for having attended this session. I would like to thank you again, the panelists. I wish you to stay safe, take care, and I hope that to have the opportunity to moderate soon a face-to-face session with all around the table, and also have to rebuild this social distancing that we are missing, all of us. Thank you very much. Enjoy the day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.